All right. Good evening, YouTube followers. This is my 35th YouTube Live. Excited to talk about all the topics that I'm ready to talk about. The first is this amazing biography of uh, Dr. Margaret Walker, written by Maryemma Graham. It took me about 600 pages to finish it, but the way Dr. Graham writes it, every page is a page turner because you want to see how her life ended. And it was absolutely motivating from the very first page. I highly encourage everybody on this YouTube live, go read Mary Emma, Dr. Mary Emma Graham's biography of Margaret Walker. It is absolutely worth it. I don't like that photo. It's a beautiful photo, but I wanted the younger photo. But it kind of shows her belief in domestic femininity. That was really the foundation for a lot of the power of her writings. Dr. Mary Emma Graham shows us. The name of the awesome biography is The House Where My Soul Lives. The House Where My Soul Lives. You definitely want to check it out. I want to look at two specific parts of the biography that really illustrates how Dr. Graham puts Margaret Walker's life in a very rich context. I was grateful to get a tweet earlier today from Dr. Graham thanking me for reading her book, and I had to reply saying, describing what makes this biography so awesome. And what makes it awesome is that she puts Dr. Margaret Walker's life in a rich context where she brings in all of the people that have written about her and is able to fuse everything in a single narrative. After a while, the page number is ultimately inconsequential. The two most important parts for me that I thought were most important of the biography for a lay audience, for a YouTube audience, for a StreamYard, LinkedIn, Facebook audience, for Instagram audience, is the part where Dr. Graham, describes the meaning of Dr. Margaret Walker's 1966 novel Jubilee, because it really speaks to how and then I just heard somebody on the TV say, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And I think in my heart, Jubilee is treasure. But because it came out at the time it came out, it was considered by most women scholars to be trash what what Dr. Margaret Walker does in that novel is to uphold and uplift the value, the meaning of domestic femininity. And so I just want to take a look at what I thought were the two best parts is Dr. Graham's description of the meaning of Walker's 1966 novel Jubilee and her engaging the ideas of Shahrazad Ali, which I thought were profound. She had a profound response to Shahrazad Ali's book, The Black Man's Guide to Understanding the Black Woman. And I want to make sure, let me see if I can give you the page numbers definitely. By the way, if you're just watching this, subscribe, like, and share. Don't hesitate to subscribe, like, and share. Here we are. This is page 364 and 365 and 366, the first excerpt I want to look at. And if you're blessed by this, don't hesitate to bless my Cash App. My Cash App is $Roan Fraser. If you get value out of anything, things that we value, we pay. So I would appreciate any payment. If you got something that you know is very meaningful from my YouTube live, don't hesitate to bless my Cash App. It's $Roan Fraser. I want to start on page 366 of Margaret Walker's biography. I read the whole biography and I found these particular parts most important. Beginning with that first paragraph, the concept of storytelling is therefore central in the novel. This is Dr. Graham talking about Margaret Walker's Jubilee. Yet Jubilee's most distinctive contribution is the use of a folk as an authenticating strategy for a fictional narrative that explores race and gender in new ways. It allowed Walker to appropriate narrative authority generally assigned to white authors of Civil War novels, because Jubilee is a Civil War novel. And still, in my opinion, we haven't really, those who are in the mainstream, understood the importance of the meaning of the Civil War, even though we're close to 200 years after it. We still haven't grasped it. and Jubilee attempts to really grasp it through the main character of Virey. Um, Graham writes Civil War novels like Gone with the Wind and male authors of slave narratives like Narrative of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. Graham writes, unlike the genre of the conventional slave narrative, Walker presents the entire novel through the lens of folklore. In the 19th century slave narratives, the acquisition of formal literacy symbolized achievement of freedom. We saw that in Douglass's narrative, thus making a distinctive break with the vernacular tradition. The slave narrator had to show the visible signs of a new self as a way of signifying a successful escape from the repressive system that made it illegal to teach a slave to read and write. In Jubilee, Maryemma Graham writes, the journey toward freedom is exchanged for Virey's search for and journey toward a home that she can call her own. And this has everything to do with the theme of A Raisin in the Sun, the way that Lena Younger prioritized owning a home rather than renting. Each of her, Graham is writing, of Walker's attempts to make a home meets with disaster. And this is the brilliant part, I believe, of Graham's biography of Walker, how she describes the meaning of Jubilee. Just as the slave faced defeat in attempting to escape from slavery before meeting with success. Graham writes, by reversing the male narrative of a runaway slave whose successful escape authorized his narrative, talking about Douglass, Walker suggested the real narrative authority rests in one's ability to create and sustain community and to make a contribution in supporting the lives of others. This is Virey's journey from her helping the white woman who was the relative of the plantation owner to helping her family, black, white. It's about creating community despite the legacy of slavery, regardless of gender or race. After her own 20 years of marriage, Walker felt compelled to insist on a female voice emphasizing womanly concerns, believing that this kind of domestic feminism had as much of a right to a hearing as the more overtly political debates. I thought that was so powerful. And this is another page. This is where I believe Graham is at her most brilliant in the way she describes the meaning of Margaret Walker's novel Jubilee. Looking at the what I found most important is the last paragraph on page 365. This is page 365, the paragraph that starts with some of these later ideas. Some of these later ideas that she promoted in Jubilee linked her to the growing feminist movement. And then I underlined this part because I thought this explained why Jubilee did not get the critical acclaim that other novels got later on by Black women. It was very profound for me to read this by Dr. Graham. She writes, but at the time she published Jubilee, second wave feminism had already begun to take on more radical overturns that made her ideas, Walker's ideas, unpopular. No young writers, and this is now she's quoting Dr. Trudier Harris, and another amazing scholar of Southern writers. Graham quotes Dr. Harris, no young writers had time for a Black woman who remained loyal to a slave heritage that Blacks were still struggling to overcome. And so that's how her work was interpreted. I'm trying to see if I can get. No, okay, yeah. So what she later says in that quote that I have at the bottom of 365 is that I'm reading that sentence from the beginning. No young writers had time for a Black woman who remained loyal to a slave heritage that Blacks were still struggling to overcome in the 60s, Trudier Harris reminds us, explaining why many considered Jubilee outdated from the date of its publication. And what Maryemma Graham's biography here that she just wrote, the 600-page tome, proves that Walker's works are not outdated. Walker's works are relevant to the 21st century. They are absolutely not outdated, and they simply, absolutely do not simply only belong to a slave heritage. That's exactly what Gwendolyn Brooks said of Pauline Hopkins, which, as I wrote in my introduction, was absolutely false. Hopkins's work is relevant in the time it was written, and it's relevant in the 21st century. Walker's novel Jubilee was relevant when it first came out in 66, and it's still relevant in the 21st century. So do yourself a favor and absolutely read The House Where My Soul Lives. This whole concept of, what Trudeau Harris describing Margaret Walker's Jubilee as being dismissed because it's thought of to be a slave heritage, it reminded me of what Debbie Allen said about issues that certain cast members of A Different World, Cree Summer and Charnel Brown, had in that episode they did called Mammy Dearest, when the image in the episode, the way that Charnel Brown performs it is phenomenal, and it reminded me um, of the lack of appreciation for um, not the slave heritage. And I really want to correct what Trudeau Harris writes, because it's not that Walker's Jubilee is celebrating slave heritage. It's that it's showing, as Graham wrote earlier, the main character's role in creating community, the importance of creating community. Um, Jubilee should not have been interpreted as a novel celebrating slave heritage. That's not what Walker was trying to do. And so Debbie Allen, when she directed this episode of Mammy Dearest, also said that certain cast members only had disdain for the image of the mammy. And that is exactly how Charnel Brown's character, Kim Reese, performed. She hated, it was triggering. She became very verbally abusive, Kim did, when she found out that her friend Whitley was going to put on display um, images that evoked the mammy figure. And Debbie Allen's point was, we got to really understand that image. It wasn't just simply degrading. I love what Lou Myers' character, Mr. Gaines, says to Kim in this episode called Mammy Dearest of a Different World. And he asks Kim, he said, do you know why Mammy is smiling? Question mark. Because she holds the treasure. And I think that's exactly what makes Margaret Walker's novel Jubilee so powerful. It shows the treasure that, despite the institution of slavery that defines everything in the time that Viri lived, she's still able to be herself, give of herself, and not allow the corrupting world to corrupt her. And this is part of what Graham writes in the biography as Margaret Walker's abiding belief in domestic femininity, and her abiding belief in the importance of community. Despite your gender in which you were born, you could still carry out those enduring beliefs in creating a home for your former enslavers, as Viri helps. There's a white female character that becomes disabled that the main character in Jubilee, Viri, helps. So again, I behoove all of those who are watching this, read the novel Jubilee for yourself, and just keep in mind that Margaret Walker's point was not to promote what was commonly believed about her novel as a slave heritage, but it was really to promote community. We came to the U.S. on different boats, as Jesse Jackson, I heard once say. We're all in the same boat now. So make sure you um, check out that also an awesome episode of A Different World called Mammy Dearest. Second part of the biography I wanted to look at is what um, Graham writes about Margaret Walker's response to Shahrazad Ali. I'm going to start um, from that paragraph that says, another unpublished but revealing interview was the one that she did with Betty Parker Smith, who had asked her, Margaret Walker, to comment on The Black Man's Guide to Understanding the Black Woman by Shahrazad Ali. The book had emerged, or the book had enraged Black women, including those who did not consider themselves feminists. Although the interview was never published, Walker spoke with her usual bluntness, calling the book dangerous with an unintelligent premise. She believed, however, that it is important for us to dialogue about the book. It is important for us to dialogue about the book. And I thought that was that was important to point out, because even though you may not agree with his premise, and there were efforts to make sure it was not read, the dialogue about how to create a more harmonious relationship was something that Walker was interested in. And then Dr. Graham quotes Walker's response more specifically to the book. This book, and this book that Walker is talking about, is Shahrazad's book, The Black Man's Guide to Understanding the Black Woman. Of that book, Walker says the book is a very good example of the enemies we face. In fact, this book is one of the best examples I know of reminding us who the enemy is. And she's saying this remembering how often Shahrazad Ali was on the popular talk shows of the early 90s and the late 80s at the time, and how it lurks around among us, and why a woman like this, Ms. Ali, would allow herself to become the tool of a system and the voice of our own enemy. When I heard her talk, I said, this sounds like the worst form of fundamental Muslim belief I have known. But I realized and accepted the fact that this is not fundamental Muslim teaching, because true Muslim persons respect their women. And she's speaking as a Christian, knowing that fundamental Muslims respect their women. This book demonstrates that women are not to be respected at all. And she's really talking about the parts in the book where Ali is suggesting ways for Black men to, quote unquote, deal with his woman. One of those things that Ali writes is an open handed slap in the mouth. But that's not, she is not, Ali is not overtly, in my mind, endorsing violence. She's just making clear that her belief is that certain women will only respond to men if they consider doing those things. Walker says that what Ali is demonstrating is that women are not to be respected at all. I, Margaret Walker, do not want to use the term which is generally reserved for men, but the word castration comes to mind when I think of her. And that's deep, because it seems like I'm not sure Walker is trying to say that Ali can only castrate men, but it seems what's profound about this is that it seems like the ultimate result, Walker is saying the ultimate result of men taking this book seriously is to be castrated. Which, of course, if you talk to Ali directly, if you watch interviews of Ali, and ask her if that was her intent, it would be clear that based on her interviews, Ali would say, castrating Black men is not my intent. However, Walker's take of the book, what is most profound before I leave this book altogether, this biography that you must read of Margaret Walker by Maryemma Graham, is Walker's point that the book must be read, even though she doesn't agree with the premise. Study the ideas, study people's responses to the ideas. And I think that is creating a space for civic debate that cannot do anything but elevate the consciousness. It can only um, create space for more harmonious relationships between Black men and Black women. And she demonstrated that. Margaret Walker demonstrated what a harmonious Black woman and Black male relationship looks like, especially with the depth of research that Dr. Maryemma Graham put into describing her up and down, Margaret Walker's up and down relationship with Ernest Alexander. Powerful read, powerful biography. I highly recommend this text, The House Where My Soul Lives, The Life of Margaret Walker by Dr. Maryemma Graham. I'm working on a more in-depth book review, and I recently did a Facebook Live specifically about Dr. Graham's chapter on Margaret Walker's biography of Richard Wright. So you could message me, tweet me if you'd like that. If you appreciate this, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, like and share my YouTube Live with friends, colleagues. Comment, please. Comments are welcome. Comments are welcome. Um, Absolutely. Comments are welcome. All right. And of course, if you're blessed to get information from this, don't hesitate to bless my Cash App $ Rome Fraser, RHONE FRASER. Speaking of awesome, amazing books, on my website are two book reviews that I completed over the past month. The first is The Case for Cancel Culture: How This Democratic Tool Works to Liberate Us All by Ernest Owens. And after reading that book, I had to balance it with a book with premises that I fundamentally agreed with. And that book was Babylon Be Still: How a Journalist Educator Adopted an African-Centered Worldview by journalist Sam P.K. Collins. Both these Black men whose books I reviewed are journalists, but they come from totally different perspectives. Um, One from the mainstream and one who was independent, Pan-African, powerful things. It was hard to get through the first book because there were so many premises that I could not agree with. I wrote about some of which Margaret Walker also mentioned, and that is the Anita Hill Clarence Thomas controversy. And Walker's very critical of both because she sees both Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill as, Black individuals who are trying to integrate into white society. And her analysis of the whole confirmation hearings between Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas was searing, and another thing that should be read by her. Babylon Be Still. It's an amazing reflection by an awesome journalist with a very important theoretical background. He does an incredible analysis of Alice Walker's novel, not novel, Alice Walker's 1973 short story, Everyday Use, that I think is relevant to Jubilee, the themes of cherishing and respecting the domestic woman and not dismissing the domestic woman is seen in that short story. And Sam P.K. Collins's read of Alice Walker's short story is absolutely powerful, and it reminds me of Jacqueline Carmichael's book on Jubilee, as well as Margaret Maryemma Graham's book, biography of Margaret Walker. The importance of the domestic woman in sustaining the entire community. So check out my book reviews on my website. And before I leave them, I want to just lift up two amazing, because y'all know I follow track and field. Two amazing runners to watch. We are about 1 month away from the 2023 Track and Field World Championships, and I want to lift up two amazing runners who were not able to participate due to injury. Nia Ali, the Philadelphia-born Nia Ali, who was the former women's 100-meter hurdler, wasn't able to be in last year's world's final. She did run in the heat, but she hit a hurdle, and I was so crushed. This time last year were the world champs, but this year she is coming back with a vengeance, and I was so glad to see her run an amazing time of just under 12:30. I believe it was 12:30. 12:30 seconds is an incredible fast time for the women's 100-meter hurdle. So I look forward to seeing her. I also want to shout out Stephen Gardiner. I keep playing that race over and over. This year, the latest race he ran in Hungary, it wasn't in Budapest, but it was in, I believe it was a Diamond League race, and Stephen Gardiner ran 43:74. And what an amazing last 100 meters of the 400-meter Stephen runs. It was searing. I keep playing that race over and over in my head. And shout out to him. Shout out to Rasheen McDonald, who I believe really challenged him in that last 100 meters in the most recent race where Stephen ran 43:74. That is an incredible time, and he shows that he's ready to defend his world title in the 400 meters. Shout out to Stephen Gardiner. I mean, just the resilience he had in that last 100 meters, the strength in that last, he's going to continue to do great things in the whole sport as he continues to perfect the 400 meter. It's an amazing thing to witness, Stephen Gardiner run the 400 meter. Um, and so I'm very proud of him. I look forward to what he will bring in the World Championships this year, which will happen by the end of next month, August 2023 in Budapest, Hungary. It's also going to be an amazing World Champs, the competition between Sha'Carri Richardson and Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce, who is still running sub-10.7s like nobody's business, even with, she says her knee is bothering her, but she's still running sub-10.7s. So it's going to be an exciting World Championships, track and field championships. Shout out to Faith Kipyegon, who just ran the world record in the mile. What an amazing, so we have some great things going on in track. Great things, great runners. It's going to make this year's World Championships exciting. I did a previous IG Live and a YouTube Live doing an in-depth study of the Eugene 2022 World Championships in track and field. So you can take a look at that on my IG. And if you're just watching this now and you've learned something from what I've shared, don't hesitate to bless my Cash App. It's $Rome Fraser. All right, subscribe, like, and share. All right, in the last 5 minutes of this YouTube, I wanted to guess. Oh, yes, get your hat also on IG and at this IG address, hats.by.a.africanmilitant. Diop Olugbala, an amazing scholar, amazing analyzer of politics, is selling these hats. I believe he still has them available here. Okay, let me see. All right. And so in the last 5 minutes, I want to lift up a very important family member of mine, my Uncle Bibbs, who is technically my grandmother's brother, passed away this past Saturday. It was sudden. I really want to lift up my uncle because, like my dad, he was one of the few men that I knew had an active library. Not only did Uncle Bibbs have an active library, but he could talk about the last book he read and tell you the ideas of the last book he read. So this is kind of a faint picture that I was able to take of his library. And there are a few books that I recognize. You can't see it, but also in this collection is the autobiography of Malcolm X, and then a book that I gave him, which is Nicole Dennis Benn's novel, Patsy. And on the left column, you can also see Marlon James's novel, A Brief History of Seven Killings. What a life. I have very fond memories of my uncle, the lessons he taught me just about being a man, about withholding your emotions, because I'm an emotionally expressive person and my Uncle Bibbs was not. But I learned how to function in the world, how to behave in the world, how to deal with people in the world by withholding my emotion and saving it for the person for whom it's valued, the person that deserves to know my emotions. So a lot of things my Uncle Bibbs taught me, and I'm grateful for every one of them. There are many books on Trump. There's one of them by Trump that his granddaughter Cheyenne gave him that I can't read the binder of because it's too far away, but that was his legacy for all of his relatives. For me, that was his legacy. Book reading. He always had his head in the newspaper. He could always talk to you about politics. He had an interest in it. There's a belief on my other side of the family that you never discuss religion and politics. Certain people on my mom's side believes you don't bring it up. That is not my Uncle Bibbs, but he was very strategic about what he said. But there was always a sieve for my Uncle Bibbs between the knowledge that he had and the knowledge that he spoke. And so there was always more that he had than what he spoke. It reminds me of the Jamaican saying, play a fool for catch wise. And you catch wise and you accumulate the knowledge, but you share it strategically in order to advance your personal goals. So shout out to Uncle Bibbs for demonstrating what it looks like to be a man and a reader. This concludes my YouTube Live. Please subscribe, share, like, bless my Cash App if you've been blessed. Um, Bless my Cash App at $Rome Fraser. God bless you. Keep reading. And as Tavis Smiley said, keep the faith.